Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. What is an individual? Identity is a process, not an object. All earth life is connected through a common ancestry. Each quote-unquote individual, each organism, cow, beetle, daisy, human, vine, is actually a consortium of transformed and still living other beings. Hi, this is Adam Huss, coming to you from Los Angeles, and the words I just read to you are from a guide sign at the Goodsell Ridge Preserve on Isle La Motte, Vermont. Isle La Motte is also the location of the 56 acres that Krista Scruggs is farming to make Zafa wines, and the message of this guide sign is strangely appropriate for the conversation you're about to hear with her. Krista has a simple story. She followed her passion for wine growing and winemaking to learn as much as she could. But like the best stories, it's only simple on the surface. Beneath the surface, her life is connected to ancient lands and ancient seas that traveled and flowed around the world to become fertile islands of wild grapevines. And her life is connected to ancient people who were enslaved and taken around the world to build the history that she is now regenerating with counterspells. Krista has the challenge and the opportunity of navigating the wine industry without many, if any, role models who share a similar story. When Krista acquired her property on Isle La Motte, she became the 18th black farmer in the entire state of Vermont and is one of the rare 1.4% of black Americans who own land. Because of this, she has been able to write a story that is unique and uniquely beautiful, with new perspectives and deep connections. A big thanks to Krista for indulging my fondness for asking big questions and discussing big ideas, and for sharing her inspiring story with us. Enjoy! Hey, I think we're recording.
I see a recording, yeah.
Krista, thank you for doing this. Welcome. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
You are in where now this morning?
I am technically in Burlington, Vermont at our office space here.
Right. And your land is in Isle La Motte, up
Correct.
near the Canadian border.
Correct.
Very cold.
Yes.
So the way that I wanted to start was just by saying that I really admire what you're building, and I think it's beautiful in a lot of ways. And I think, the way I put it is that it seems like you followed your passion to be just a wine grower and winemaker, and somewhere along the way it became something much bigger than that, or deeper than that. And I just wanted to see if you could start by, in your own words, telling your story, but not the story that we can look up, but the essence behind those sort of point by point things. Why do you see those things of having happened? Like, what's the animating force in your life that brought you to where you are now?
I like that you stated that deeper is that really resonates with me. I was recently doing an interview with someone, and they had, one on my Twitter went back 5 years, which was 5 years ago was when I first landed in Texas. Then eventually did a stage with La Garagista, and then ultimately that led to a job offer that ultimately brought me here to Vermont. At that point in time, after working in the corporate end and then doing stages domestically and abroad, and coming back and setting my intentions. And my intentions, were, I would like to say innocent in the sense of pure in its pursuit of one, to be a student and a participator in farming and winemaking. At that time, 5 years ago, the word Zafa didn't have the meaning that it has for me right now, nor would I think of, nor could I have dreamt or thought that it would have the meaning that not only for me, but the people who are involved in everything that it is, and how it's spread, as much as it's spread, and what my intentions are have spread and resonated with people outside of me. And so in a way, I've grown up as a person, and what, the intent of just wanting to make wine and farm, which I think I can also say motivated, because it takes it by ego and self-serving as involved as something that is bigger than me. And thus,
You mean the farming, what do you mean by that? What part of that is bigger
what,
than you?
what part of which part?
You were saying, did I hear you? I thought you were saying that being involved in the agriculture, the farming part was inherently sort of being involved in something bigger than you. Is that what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think, when I was the reasoning behind wanting to first and foremost be a grower, not just a producer. I don't think I understood the magnitude of one, first and foremost, that that's being part of less than 2% of fellow Black Americans in this country that own farmland and operate farmland in America. I didn't think I realized that that meant that I would be the 18th farm owner out of 7,000 in Vermont. And what that represents not only for me, but everything that what that means, especially think about what we're navigating right now, and what the light that is open in regards to having access to your own food that you grow, and being able to grow your own food even outside of a value added product such as wine. What land ownership means, I don't think I knew I got that at my young ripe age of 31.
That's amazing. So what does it mean to you now? I mean,
A
and
responsibility that's bigger than me, and that I have been given a once in a life opportunity to not only be an example but also be a catalyst, so that that number 1.6%, 10 years, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, is 16, 26%, whatever that number may be. It's bigger than what it is. And I'm very, very aware of the presence that I have and that I've created and continue to create in this industry. And what I'm doing is beyond just, me wanting to make wine and farmland.
yeah, that that's pretty special. Do you get a chance to think about that in the day to day, like,
No, I
or
don't.
does it
And
sort?
when I do, I break down. I break down in one form or another, in happiness or sadness. It's still very surreal for me, but I don't, because I'm still. I mean, in many ways, I just began. I think my chance has barely started. Now,
Yeah.
contrary to
And when
when you see my journey, I think people, the journey up to this point, or things people don't know. It was all for this moment to get started. This is now the beginning of it.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny that I mean, so much. I feel like it seems like so much has happened for you, especially in this past year, that it's like you've arrived. But like you said, it's there's there to start your journey, you had to take a journey, basically.
Exactly, exactly.
It's been a hell of a year. I mean, in so many ways, and we just went through a hell of a January, and at least politically speaking, and I guess from the pandemic side as well. Like here in California, it's been pretty fraught. Um, but how so? How does one talk about wine and things of when there's so much else going on? Like, where does it fit into your world? How do you see it as fitting into these times, when there's so many really like life and death and things that will affect people for the rest of our lives, at least.
And just like anything else prior, of course, this is the first time our generation is experiencing a pandemic, but um, life and death is always and will always be around us.
Hmm.
The wine has its purpose in regards to pleasure. I think how we think about it and its importance, and then also what what does it bring to society from first how it's made, and then thus what is the who's participating in it to get to that point that you're drinking it, and what is it, and what are you getting from it? And I think that if you're able to have honest conversation with yourself and see the good in it, and then it serves a purpose. But and I really think that just, and then there's also parts of this things of this year that I think people are now choosing. Sometimes I feel contrived at times, but choosing to pay attention to in regards to systemic issues, and that's something that I've always, since the day I was born, had to deal with. So there's not much that changed for me there. Um,
Just more attention given to it.
yeah, and so I don't think my view on wine has, in my relationship with it, has changed due to the fact that we're in a pandemic or the systemic issues that are now that people are now choosing to pay attention to or sit with. But if anything, I think it just goes back to what I stated before, just how important it is, and how lucky I am that I am able to have access to land, and that it's times like this is that I think we are reminded how having control of how you grow your food, and what you put in your body is, and having space to just be, when a lot of people who are dying from this pandemic is due to not having space or cannot afford to not work. That, if anything, was resonated with me the most.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I can't agree more in terms of the importance of how the importance of these things has been underlined in this past year, and just in terms of food production, and the need, our health, just the way that health is connected to land, and how we treat it, and how we're using it, and how we're living in it. You I this is something that I'm kind of still toying with, but I been loving the idea lately about how culture is this root of viticulture and agriculture, and what that means, like how we're participating in really not just a food production or wine production, but we're participating in a ongoing, like you said, a bigger thing, this cultural thing that outlives us, and that creates the world that people see and live in and interact with. And I think about we know from our knowledge of French viticulture and things like that, how that creates a whole lifestyle for the people that are involved in it. And I think we're at this great point, and I don't know if maybe you want to talk about this, to where we are in history in terms of seeing how not thinking about it from a cultural standpoint, only thinking of it as a business investment, has led us to where we are. And now we're kind of maybe needing to, or not maybe, but definitely needing to reevaluate that and think about where we're taking this culture, the viticulture and the agriculture. Did I set you up for well enough there?
No, absolutely. And I think that just, once again, like I think that this stems from, when we look at, restaurant workers from basic, look about, how restaurant workers are affected by this pandemic. And then this shining on that for food, what is considered, what is the term, essential worker. And I don't think that people, when thinking about even drinking a bottle of wine or going out to restaurants, and realizing that first and foremost, that how that food or how that bottle of wine got to your bottle, that there's a farmers, and usually underpaid, not the landowner, grower people, not the landowner, underpaid people who are the reason why that you're able to have that bottle of wine. And they're the ones who are the true viticulturists, who there's an erasure about their role in that food chain. but then it's been romanticized because of our looking over, over the ocean, and then even, think about California and its peak and growth of the romanticism of wine, but not talking about the romanticism begins first and foremost in the vineyard and the farming of it.
You mentioned that, I mean, you said, which I really liked, that you just wanted to be a student of wine and winemaking, that was kind of what you were into. I love that attitude and I love that approach. And I wonder what have you learned in the past year about wine and winemaking?
That I don't know shit.
In what way don't you know shit?
That, and I don't know shit, and truly, 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 as frankly as Zafa as a business is growing, I've had to, will continue to have to make choices of my role in our growth, and where I am most, what I feel is where I'm most valued and most useful. And it's definitely, as a student when I don't know shit, and as I think most importantly, it's something that's been very, very easier than I thought. But having to define and make choices of um, where am I most useful, and where can I step back, and then where can how can I be a part of this company still, and it grow in the way that I vision it to, but it still has my heart in it. And honestly, it's I think possibly people will be surprised, because my pursuit of land ownership and wanting to be a grower and farmer, and my vision within all the parcels that we lease, and then even with Isle La Motte on board now, because I can't be out there every day. I think it would be an injustice for me to actually put that energy out there that I can't commit 100%, wherein I have team members and people whose heart and souls in it, I could be out there every day in a way that I was able to be out there, and prior to the last year and a half. And that what I learned is that the importance of also my energy or my heart is in the winemaking, and that I can teach, and I could tell, and I'm all about 100% transparency and open source in regards to, even on my tech sheets, I'll walk you through every step of the process how I made that wine. But because I'm me, and everything I'm doing is nothing new in regards to fermentation, but no one can replace me in that wine, and then the importance of the hand of the winemaker and those little decisions that cannot be replicated or duplicated. It's something that I'm learning more and more, and I think it's slowly making me a better winemaker, making me more insecure in a good way, and thus never questioning myself, but testing myself, um, in a way that I've been surprised by. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah. So it sounds like part of it is, if I'm right, it sounds like you're saying you're sort of learning how to be a leader rather than do it all yourself.
Exactly, because there were a lot of mistakes that were made, even in the 2019 vintage, that I think is not a thing I know is a reflection of things I chose not to let go of, or things that that I could have been a better leader and delegated and utilized myself more, had I not held on to something so tightly.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're like me, I mean, part of, I think, the brain pattern that is attracted to winemaking is super controlling, anal retentive a little bit,
Right.
at least to some degree. You
Right.
care about it. You care about the details. And it's hard to.
And that's what I learned, is that that is not that is not, just like, treating a lover in that way, that's not going to will anything good at all, being a controlling, obsessive lover.
Whew, yeah.
Treating wine that, thinking of wine in that same way.
Yes. Yep. Totally. That is a great lesson to learn in all parts of life. I want to ask you, you brought this up, but Zafa uh, has come to mean more to you. What does it mean? Like what does it mean literally, and how does that play into the meaning that it means
Literally,
now to
what
you?
it means is counterspell. It's a literary reference to the book, "The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde" by Gino Diaz, and the theme
Hmm.
of the book revolves around Fuku and Zafa. Fuku means spell, and as the book tells it, and as Juno tells it, Junior, the main character, tells it, is it's the curse that Christopher Columbus brought over to the Americas. Um, and the only way to overcome a fuku is with a zafa, which is a counter spell.
Mm.
And so I really do think that, I truly do think that when I loved the idea of what that meant in theory, but honestly, I didn't think that, you know 5 years later, at the point in time, 4 years later, when I came with the name Zafa, that I would actually have access to land, which is the embodiment, especially as a Black America, of embodiment of a counterspell in this country, being in my ancestors were slaves.
Mm.
And yeah, and so it's everything that my vision, coming to fruition in its own way. And they say, be careful what you wish for. And usually, I think people say that in a negative connotation, but I think I'm looking at it to say that, and it's in the sense that be careful what you wish for. Now you have a greater responsibility,
Yeah.
which has
No, truly.
has pushed me and deeper in this meeting. And I think it's been a theme for me this last year, particularly, is I've been pushed to step up to the plate of being and grow and evolve, to being a better leader.
I can't say how that much that just touched me, because I mean, I think so much of where we are as an American culture is about wishing with care. Like
Hmm.
what do we want really, and let's really be thoughtful about it. It's is materialism really the end all be all? Is like, I mean, I think of America as business above all else. The business bottom line above all else, and there's so many sacrifices and compromises that have been made in service of that. And I think like we're just at that point where we have to be more thoughtful about that. Like
Yeah.
we have to wish for different things because we've taken the time to think about it and be careful about our wishes, and know that there are more important things in life.
And I made a, explicit choice to participate. I'm not going to wrap a bow tie around it. I am participating in capitalism, but there's that could be acknowledged with and that can be acknowledged, but still with the pursuit of shaping it and how that relationship that I and Zafa, my business, has with it.
No, that's the thing. Like we are participating in it. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for explaining Zafa too. That is profound. I love that. I Are you? I want to get into some of the specifics of Zafa, and what you're doing with your wines and your viticulture. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Isle La Motte and Vermont in general. It's, I think your high today is in the 20s, which you have
A
said
storm
is
just
is
passed through.
lovely for you.
Yeah.
Balmy almost. Um, t-shirt weather. So, what's it like there? Like, I mean, in terms, obviously, like I'm guessing having your vineyard on an island in a large lake has that lake influence effect. So you get the moderating influence and that the benefits that come from that in terms of hopefully like less chance of frost damage, a little more less. I don't know. Maybe you should describe rather than me guessing at it, but go for it.
Yeah. So I mean, I previously had managed a vineyard, on another island, Grand Isle, in 2018, and that I didn't even, and up to that point, I did not know that about the islands, and the oldest vineyard in Vermont was actually Snow Farm was planted in South Hero, um, and after spending time, in 2018, managing a vineyard out there and experiencing the warming effect, and also, of course, the soil that's there compared to, granted, the soils throughout Vermont are ideal, but particularly the silty loam that is in on the islands, and particularly the site that I chose, and massive limestone as well, coupled with the fact that um, Isle La Motte, in the 1800s, from 1801, I believe, to 1831, the name was changed to Vineyard, and it's speculated due to the amount of wild vines, which has been documented but not disputed, were the first sites of wild vines that were found in Vermont. Um,
What do you mean by wild wines? Like they were
these this
just
native, so this is
fermenting?
ripara, right? Native ripara and Labrusca vines that are
So
growing.
whatever had sprung up naturally
Yeah,
over
no,
the many
naturally,
months.
and yeah, and I'm sure there's different, even strange outside of the ripara and Labrusca that is growing, that it is
I
there.
love
So
that.
even the property, the Isle La Motte property, um, around the bluff, right on the water, there's the whole wall is covered with vines, and
Nice.
all in the back. And there's 56 acres, and part of that acreage, it used to be an orchard back there, and there's all these. So there's the mixture of cultivated and wild apple trees that, of course, seeded themselves from the other apples that were fall. And there's also cows there, and then within those apple trees and pear trees, there's also wild vines growing. So, in addition, Isle La Motte sits on um, the Chazzy Reef, which traveled from Zimbabwe uh, to that area about 450 million years ago, which is known to be one of the most biodiverse um, artifacts in the history of the world. So there's all these variables
That's
um,
amazing. There's
there,
a
and
there's
then just I think, I mean, first and foremost, if something is growing on its own without humans intervening and out cultivating, I think that's a sign that this is a place to plant vines.
well you I hope you understand the depth of the both the human and geological history that you're working with there. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah,
That's
it is. It's something that I'm still dumbfounded by, and if anything, I'm just lucky because it's like it couldn't have. I think it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, to be able
do
to be lucky enough to tend to that land and tell its story, and
mm,
yeah.
I yeah. I I often wish that I had more than one life. Yeah, even simultaneously.
Mm.
I could live in different places and be different people and speak different languages. Do you know the Good Soul Ridge Preserve?
No, I don't.
Oh, it's I did I just you know internet searched for Isle La Motte and it came up as something on there, and the whole thing. Actually, there's a picture of it that has a black hand holding a dandelion, you know, with the sun and the like the barn in the background in the picture. And I was like, I wonder if that was Krista that posted that picture.
Ooh, the
Um,
Gold Sun Ridge Reserve,
a good soul,
a
good
Goodsell Ridge
G-O,
Reserve.
good
No.
cell. Yeah, and it's apparently on, and it's they have all these like crazy ancient um fossils. That's the word I'm looking for. The
Hmm. Hmm.
fossils that are from that era that you're talking about. And it's like, what do they call it? I'm trying to look for it. Anyway, the there's I just tripped on it because it was all these little signs that they have that they just put up, that are like when you walk around on any little place like that, that's like a little state park or whatever,
Right, right,
you're
right.
like, what is this? And it's like, it's asking the question. Some of the questions they ask, what is it? what is an individual?
Holy
What is a
shit, I did not
plant?
know that.
And it's like the answers that they give are amazing. Like I was like, this is mind blowing stuff. Like, like you don't. I'm somebody who did the copy for this was just brilliant because it's like talking about what are fungi, what are plants, what are animals, what are humans, and it's like these are deep questions, people, and the answers are amazing. And some of it ties directly into winemaking that what we're finding out now, just about like how I mean, literally, it says identity is a process, not an object. That's on the
Wow,
sign
wow,
on one of these little park signs.
wow,
And I was like, this is incredible.
wow.
Um, and it's talking about like these tens of trillion, like a trillion bacteria and tens of millions of protists make up this one little the body of a termite, which lives in a superorganism cell. Like the actual hive of termites is considered an individual because they all participate in one process. They're all like without the other, they're all part of the same process. And then
Right.
within each termite, there are trillions of little processes, little bacteria, microbial processes happening. It's just
That's
fascinating, and I know
beautiful.
we're learning about that with the soil and everything else that's
Exactly.
going on.
Exactly.
But it was just funny because I was just looking into where you lived, and I was like, "This is amazing."
I'm
Cool.
now when after this, I'm actually gonna look that up now myself.
Yeah, no, it's worth checking out. And then just randomly, I thought of this because we were talking about death and wine. Have you read the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam?
I have not.
I'll send you a copy.
Please.
Yeah, it's the Rubaiyat are these sort of quatrains, so four line sort of stanzas, and each one can be, it's almost like a haiku, like it can be its own sort of standalone poem. But the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam have sort of, it's like a whole bunch of them compiled into a book that sort of tells a story. And winemaking and wine is the theme, and as is mortality. And it's really beautiful. It's ancient. It's from ancient Persia, and it's lovely. Like there's some great stuff in it. You probably would recognize. There's, if you've ever heard the quote, like a loaf of bread, a jug of wine, and thou.
Mhm, mhm.
That's from that.
Got it, got it.
Um, and anyway, thought of that random. uh, I want to talk more about your viticulture and hybrids since you brought those up. Hybrids and wild. So you have wild things growing. You're planting hybrids. Are you using? I know you use the sort of feral apple trees that you've used feral apple trees for co-ferments. Are you using? Are you going to throw in some bunches of wild grapes into a batch and see what happens as well?
Yee. Curiosity. Vinny then would make jam out of it. I'm sure, once I'm living out there and my own curiosity will get the best of me, I'm sure I wouldn't doubt it that I wouldn't doubt if I would try to do some kind of micro fermentation just out of curiosity. Um,
Yeah,
just yeah,
there's
because
probably not
there's
a
so many
ton
of
of
them
them.
growing out there, and I could probably get a carboy's worth.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
just out of curiosity to see.
Yeah, and I mean, not to add more pressure to you, but like, not that you don't already have the weight of generations on your shoulders, but I feel like you are at at the forefront of creating the future of what is real American wine. I mean, we've imported vinifera from Europe, and we've done pretty good with those, but I don't think when we talk about terroir, when we talk about American wine, I don't think it until you start asking the questions about these native grapes and the hybrids that have been made from them. Like, I'm curious what you think about that and where you feel you fit
I just think
into
it's
that
so
role.
fascinating that, a common, particularly American consumer who were to have a wine from Italy, would not realize that unless it's, Barolo, Chianti, that most of what they're drinking is it would be a native grape to Italy. Italy has over 3,000 native grapes there, and It is
Right.
the emphasis on that relationship with America, like that consumers have with America, and the glorification of vinifera. Um,
Right.
and I think it's of course it's coupled in how we navigate society, theory, implicit bias, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all a part of that, and how we consume anything that is we don't know or understand. That I think it makes sense why up to this point not now, but I think the way that one giving access to having have a diversity in thought, and thought is of course going to create diversity in product. And so the more, and so it shouldn't be surprising that to having someone like me, a part of the industry, creating that, that I would be creating something that is not that part of the norm. And that's the beauty of having diverse in thought, and part of participating of a bigger whole. So I think it's a sign of us evolving and growing. Um, and I think that we underestimate what average wine drinker actually would think. I think that's a big part of it. Of that, the consumer's palate is shaped around how we put things on a pedestal, and I think the more that we take the time to educate and talk to particular American palates about different varietals and varieties, and shapes, and farming, and connecting to them in the way that they understand food from a shopping at Whole Foods. I think that we're about to have a lot of fun, and who
Yeah.
doesn't want to have more options of things to consume and bringing pleasure?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I mean, I think you share the sense that I do, that we're really at just the beginning of figuring all this out. Like
Exactly.
a couple hundred years from now, the grapes that we think about now will be the ancestors of what's actually, been determined to work better, grow best in the areas where we're working and things like
Right.
that.
I mean, like, look at, like, the work that Randall Graham continues to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, which I'm excited about. We'll all be dead and gone before we see what that turns out to be, but I can't fucking wait.
Yeah, I know, I know. There's some great things happening. Yeah, Randall's doing some great stuff. I mean, even Sun the Rajpar and
Mhm,
the
mhm.
his team are doing stuff from seeds, and I know
Exactly.
Mimi Castile is doing that, and
Yeah,
I
I was gonna
know,
say Mimi as well. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
yeah, and there's, I know apples are being experimented with in New York and Vermont as well in the same
Mhm.
kind of way. It's really exciting. Yeah, because we're finally getting over our prejudices in
Exactly.
those ways, to be able to embrace new things that are different, and realize, oh wait, there's like untapped wells here that just,
And it's
we haven't
bizarre the
even.
amount of fear that, how long it took us this long to get to this point, because
Yeah.
leading to fear, the fear of having options.
Yeah. Yep. It's true. Well, so I'm curious about farming in Vermont, and why don't we talk about? Let's start with Japanese beetles.
Hmm.
What are the realities there in terms of viticulture? Like, what is your growing season like? How short is it?
This, that's funny you ask, because this last year, 2020 vintage was one for the ages. We were Hers came it was shortened by 2 weeks. So typically, we'll start pruning. Typically, actually, up until prior to this year, we didn't start pruning until January. We started pruning in December. We'll be done. We have five
My vine still
sites.
had leaves in December.
Hmm?
My vine still had green leaves in
Exactly,
December.
exactly. There's snow on the
Uh,
ground. My team actually be providing some snowshoes to my team tomorrow.
oh my god.
They're, we'll be done with all of our sites from Isle La Motte and everything between to New Hampshire, uh, by April, by hopefully by the first week of April, and then we go into the growing season, April through about that the well, up until last year. I think last year is going to be. I think it's going to. I assume we're going to follow suit, until the second week of August.
Wow.
Typically,
That's harvest?
we started harvest the last week of August last year, and typically harvest doesn't start until the second week of September.
Is this because it
Uh,
was really hot or because
it was
bad
hot. It
weather
was
was
hot.
coming? Okay.
And another thing that people don't realize is that why, whether it be at one point in time, Vermont and New York were the largest producers of hops in America before going to the Pacific Northwest. And
Oh,
and even farming, thinking about farming organically in general in this region, why it's so difficult is because of the rain and humidity that we get during the growing
right,
season. We'll hit 75, 80 degrees and we'll get rain. We
right.
had a very, very, from a disease mitigation perspective, it was hot and dry, and that was awesome. However, our growing season was cut short, and typically this led into another issue. Um, Culturally here in the state, from the growers here, it's not part of the norm to net out here. Mostly by the time when the sugar is hitting, um, when the sugar is hitting, the birds have already the birds that we had most issues with have already migrated. This year, the birds were still here because of the time of harvest, and most of us had our dill bricks. The birds are still here. They realize, fuck,
Oh,
there's sugar. They're just pecking. They just want it for the liquid. And I'll speak for myself, but we lost out of um, one of our site, we lost 90% of our crop, and another site we lost at least 40% of the crop.
oh, that's
And
heartbreaking.
I not and this is where me growing and evolving and as a grower too, and my ideologies, I think it's your privilege to have ideologies that you can live off of.
Right. That's a very
And
good way to put that.
me, and where I stand in regards to netting, and it takes time to integrate a system that is working cohesively with the fauna and flora to be in balance, that to say I won't need to bird net, and then pray for the best. And so now I have to make a decision that I can't afford to lose that tonnage this year. And as we could still practice and implement ways in those particular sites to have balance between with the birds and with our crops, um, I had to put those ideologies aside and protect my fruit. Something that I think I was very naive about prior, and that now, it was I had teammates that were literally crying, and
Mm,
as a reminder to them that nature is unforgiving, and they don't
yeah.
give, and like, and it's us finding that balance of knowing that nature is going to do what they got to do, and how do we respect that while taking responsibility that we're the invasive ones right now.
Mm, yeah. That's great. I mean, of all the things that you could do, netting seems, probably lowest intervention to,
Yeah.
lowest harm that you could do to
And the beauty is, like with the Isle La Motte
protect
site,
yourself.
I think we're going to we'll be in second leaf this year, and I'm thinking about when that site is fully producing, and the fact that I chose location near the water and the amount of predatory birds that are
Mm,
around that, we might be dealing with other issues, but I'm like, that's awesome. I'm not going to worry about netting there. Um,
oh, interesting. Got it.
yeah. That's what
Oh,
honestly
fair.
went through my mind. So like just in the summer, seeing all the predators flying around, like that's my protection. And also
Yeah.
all these birds want is water anyway. And
Right. Right.
so that I have
Plenty
a
of
natural
that around.
distraction. And I'm sure for that, there's going to be some other bullshit I'm going to have to deal with. But
Right. Totally.
no good deed goes unpunished, so
Slugs
they
or
say.
something. That's funny. So, and it also sounds like part of it could just be a decision based on the ripening of the grapes too. Like if you have the right kind of vintage where you can harvest late, the birds will most likely be gone and maybe leave the nets off that year. Like
Exactly.
so that you're learning the land a little better as well, and I mean I think that it's funny. It's one of the not funny, but it's one of the results of climate change that you can see that you're having to make these decisions.
Exactly.
Uh, and so it's maybe part of the positive of being as far north as with the cold winters, it does keep bug populations in check. But I know that you still have a pretty severe bug
Oh,
population.
you're talking about Japanese beetles.
Yeah, yeah.
I just went to the trauma of 2020.
So what happened? Like, I mean, I grew up with those too in Pennsylvania, and it
Yeah.
was like, there's all kinds of obviously horrible things that you can spray to do that. But what do you do? I mean, it's funny because I went and I was talking to somebody about growing a vineyard there. I was just sort of like free consulting about what they could do, and he was like, we tried planting vines and they were just eaten. Like every leaf on them just was gone. Like they were
Yeah,
just and it has to do partly with where it is. I know that they live in grass, or they plant their larvae in grass. So if you have sort of like cow pastures and meadows and things like that, you're in trouble because there's going to be a large beetle population. But if you're in
exactly.
a forested area, you might have less pressure. So, but what happened, and what do you do as an organic grower, biodynamic grower,
So it's
regenerative?
funny because the first was supposed to be my first vintage in Vermont, and ended up being my first vintage in Texas, which 2017. Um, was lost because of a site due to Japanese beetles. Now, out of
Mm,
all of New Hampshire, not an issue. In New Hampshire side that we just started leasing as of last year, but we're purchasing fruit from it prior. The Japanese beetles are not an issue at all, and with Huntington and Northfield and Warren, all the three other sites, they and particularly in Huntington, were very vigorous, very vigorous canopy. We see them, and we feel that site is closest to being in balance as can be at this moment. We treat the Japanese beetles as they're doing our leaf pulling for us. Um,
right.
and
Yeah.
so I actually have been, lucky to this point with the sites that we have under our belt right now. The Japanese beetles have been actually has helped us, um, in the sense of honestly leaf pulling, which we have to do a lot, big part
Right.
of our time in the growing season, is canopy management, because especially with dealing with, as I was speaking before, how humid it can get, with the rain and how the heat, and it's keeping up with the airflow at those sites. And so they've actually, for right now, have worked with us. Um,
That's great. Yeah.
and
I,
and how we do, and how we help with deterring them, is that we do use kaolin clay with all of we spray, in regards to our spray, we do mixes of, I don't do copper 100%, just sulfur, minimal sulfur, and mixed with nettle and horsetail tea, and we add in kaolin clay. And so the beetles themselves, when they're standing on, they don't like it on their feet.
oh yeah.
And
Okay.
so that has helped. But yeah, right as of right now, in particularly the last two growing seasons, the Japanese beetles have been our friend.
Nice. That's a cool sort of story
Yeah,
about how that can.
I know that's not the
I,
case for everyone,
yeah.
and I'm
I
assuming, I don't, and I am curious of you know especially, like, this experience with this last growing season with climate change, of if that will change, in
yeah.
regards to uh,
I've
the pests.
sorry.
Oh,
No,
sorry,
go
in
ahead.
regards to the pests that we have on our site. So it the last yeah the last year and the last 2 years have been, it was more dry last year. Our biggest issue here, I would say, farming organically here, it still remains for me, and so to do with, but I think is changing, is going to be changing, is fighting the rain and humidity and
So the
canopy
fungal,
management.
like downy and powdery and black
Yeah,
mold, black
exactly.
rot.
Yeah. But it's our biggest issue and is yeah, powder. Particularly for me and our sites, has been downy and black rot,
Yeah.
and and that's the importance of having, boots on the ground every day. And and in all of our sites, those diseases, they're already there. They're not going to go anywhere. And so now our growing season is focused on mitigation because we're not going to be
Right.
able to eradicate it. Um,
Right.
so so our spray program revolves around sulfur and then regalia, which is a biofungicide
Yeah.
utilizing knotweed. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and
I,
we spray every other week, rotating the two. Um, but it's
you
I
know,
even that is just mostly it's just having that our disease mitigation is based off like leaf pulling and getting those disease leaves out of there and just walking every day, every day, every day, every day, every day. And
yeah.
being on top of, not spraying on a schedule, but spraying if we are going to spray the regalia or sulfur, it's revolving around when the last rain is. So it's mostly just being at mercy of Mother Nature. And if it's dry, then making that call to focusing our time at spraying, but just actually just going through and continuing with the canopy management to keep an airflow to stop from the disease from spreading. Because, like I
Right.
said, I have accepted you're going to lose. I'm okay with losing 1 to 5% of a crop by farming the way that we're farming. We don't use tractors in Isle at all, and so granted, but I am looking for it, and I did put a deposit down for the Monarch tractor that I do want.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
And so I would rather spend our time instead of, and we do use backpack spray too. So we get to be a little bit more focused, and more
Right.
intentional when we're spraying. But ideally, if it's dry, we only did 3 sprays last year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's really
because
great.
it was so dry. There was no need. Like we were able to get particularly the downy, sorry, the powdery and black rot under control. And I just feel if there's no threat of it spreading, um, due to having a weather system come through, then I think it's not necessary to spray just to spray. I rather, like I said,
Right.
focus on managing the canopy and keeping airflow going.
That's great. A couple things came up. I don't know if you know Dr. Pam Marone,
I
but
don't.
I interviewed her on one of the episodes for the Organic Wine podcast, and she's she created the business that made Regalia.
Oh wow! I have
So
to listen
she's
to that
yeah,
podcast. I didn't.
yeah, she's
That is so
fantastic. She's
cool. I haven't talked to many producers that is working with regalia. I mean, it's not one. I know it's not that. This is a conversation in regards to cost versus but it's not the cheapest, but I think it's very effective. And if anything,
right.
it's thus the bottom line is still protected in that way. If that makes sense. So
Yeah.
not to say I love not synthetic pesticide, but I do love regalia.
Yeah, no, no, the bios are great. I mean,
Yeah.
she has amazing stories about the things that they're finding. I mean, they basically are sort of like the way that pharmaceuticals go to the rainforest and, try to find obscure leaves and things that are there.
Hmm.
Like she goes all around the planet digging up soils from various places and isolating amazing microbes in the soil that can work to benefit, in viticulture. It's
I
amazing.
have to
Like
listen to that podcast and hopefully possibly reach out to her. Like that is
she's
so fucking
now
cool.
she spends a lot of time mentoring and fostering, especially female business owners who are getting into biologicals and things like that. So you should definitely
I'm
check it
definitely
out.
going to.
Yeah, she's a really cool person. I can't recommend her enough. The other thing I was thinking, I have an untested theory about Japanese beetles that chickens could be a good mitigation strategy
I've heard of
because
that. Yeah, because
the way they dig. I mean, we have
exactly,
chickens here in our
exactly.
backyard, and like they dig the whole yard up basically. Like they're, I always think it's funny. This is just a total aside, but our chickens have more than enough space because we have 5 chickens in our backyard and a pretty big backyard area for them. So like we made it so that they could technically be pasture raised. I think you need 108 square feet per bird to be to qualify for pasture raised.
Hmm.
And it just gives you like the reality check of like 108 square feet for a chicken is nothing. Like they have, it looks like a tilled field where they
Right.
are, it's just 5 chickens. They like dig all day long. There is no grass. There's nothing there other than the trees and like permanent shrubs like
So
rosemary that they
true.
won't eat. It's crazy. But yeah, I always thought that they might help with the beetle larvae. If you get them into the vineyard and the, surrounding areas at the right time of year, they just eat all the larvae, dig everything up and eat all the larvae.
No, absolutely. I have heard that as well.
Um, and then shoot, the last thing that you said, and I've totally forgot it, but I'm gonna move on anyway. You know, you put so much care and attention into the vineyard, and I've noticed this too. I mean, that's like our big focus too, is making that connection for people from the glass to the vineyard. And the thing that's been frustrating me lately is more and more I'm finding people who go into a wine shop and they care so much about whether sulfites have been added to their wine, and they don't even ask about the farming. And
Right.
and to me that's just absurd. If you're looking for purity in terms of winemaking and you don't care about what happened in the vineyard, I just feel like your priorities are off. And I'm wondering, how do we get people to care about what's actually important in this hierarchy of wine
I'm
making?
hoping that that was something that really really grated at me, and just hearing conversations about sulfur. And granted, I'm 0 0,
Yeah. And
and
are you
but
100% sparkling?
yeah, 100% sparkling. So that allows me,
Yeah, you get
I find
the
comfort in
carbon.
in CO2. So
Yeah, you get the CO2 protection, so that's nice.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so that might shape, I might be at a place that's, privileged in that sense, that like, because of the fact that I'm 100% sparkling, and I'm not concerned. But also, even with, you know, um, co-sellers, which is the share level I have at Shacksbury, it's based off, Shacksbury's original, where they started off as doing like native yeast and small batch, and married with Zafa's um, ideals, and making something that's accessible, and still carrying on of not utilizing sulfur there. Um, and but knowing that it's particularly, if co-sellers expands and grows, and we're able to, introduce people, and educate people that wine is made from, and not just grapes, an array of fruit. And that means for stabilization, we have to add sulfur. Am I going to feel like I'm uh, turning my back on my ideals? No, because how I compensate for that, and the fact that first and foremost, we pay our employees a livable wage and they're taken
Yeah.
care of. So those are the people who are front line. That's number one,
Yeah.
people should care about. And then
Yeah.
two, and that's coupled with, what are those frontline people? What are they doing? They're the ones who are doing the farming, organically farming. That's the food that is then being, fermented. I think that until consumers will start caring about that, when the wine industry starts putting, you know, the winemaker on a pedestal.
Yeah, I love that. I've talked a lot about that, about, it's like we I mean, at least inside the industry, we know the names of, you and I probably could list 20 different winemakers that we
Mhm.
know, and how many vineyard managers could we list?
Exactly,
Like,
exactly.
yeah, it's true. It's
And being honest about it too. Like, there's no way I'm not the only, you know, producer who is a business whose business is growing, and that, I would say out loud, "Hey, I actually don't do that anymore. I'm not in the vineyard every day anymore."
yeah, yeah,
And I feel like that, and being like, and not feeling that's, and actually meaning that when you say that, you're actually giving value to your team.
right.
You're educating people that one person cannot do it. It's not physically possible. And so then it forces people to see the whole picture.
Yeah. Yep. I love that. And I want to continue talking with you, but I'm afraid I should let you go. Let me see. What's the best way for people to learn more and try your stuff? And, what's the deal? How do
Um, so it's awfulwines.com. You can see, Instagram, as always. We haven't been so active, even, during this last harvest. I'm and myself even stepping away from social media. And we will be revamping up, but it won't be me controlling it. But of course, Instagram
nice.
is the best way to stay up to date. But even more, I would say, just signing up for our newsletter. We have That is where we give actually up, like, true in depth updates of what's going on. Not just from Facebook, but actually what's happening in the vineyard, and you also get to know when we're releasing new wines. And so, yeah, we're hoping to have some new stuff out. We still have a lot of wine from 2019 yet to be released. And so hoping wines start coming out again in April.
Okay. Exciting.
It's ZafaWines.com.
Excellent. Okay, Zafa Wines, plural wines.
Yeah, correct.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Krista. This has been a real pleasure, and I love what you're doing, and I'm really honored to be able to bring more attention to it. It's been lovely.
Thank you, Adam.
And I can't wait to see what happens with you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Krista Scruggs as much as I did. In the last year, Krista has gotten a lot of attention, both positive and critical, and I think it's important to remember that it isn't easy to do the work that she's doing. At the end of the day, she's running a small production, handcrafted winery, and I can tell you firsthand that it's an extremely tough business for anyone. And she's grounding that work in stewardship of the land and compassion and equity for her employees. These are values that I love to promote and aim to emulate, and I hope you'll join me in encouraging Krista to continue to do what she's doing. The easiest way to support a winemaker is, of course, to buy their wines. So go to zafawines.com, that's Z-A-F-A wines.com, to buy Krista's wines or join her Counterspell Club. And if you want to support this podcast, please tell your friends and fellow wine lovers about it. And go to centraliswine.com, that's CENTRALAS wine.com, and purchase some of our organically grown, handcrafted wines there. Thanks for listening.